Welcome back to another edition of Dear Old State Update, brought to you by Penn State Sports Night. I'm Bronwyn Leiber, joined alongside Amanda Vogt. Our beat reporters have been in action, attending and covering games in order to bring you all the Penn State sport updates. Now, without further ado, let's get right into the action. Penn State football now holds the number 3 position in the AP Top 25 poll after improving to 6-0 with the win over USC on Saturday. But before the Nittany Lions traveled west, UCLA came to Happy Valley. In a striped-out Beaver Stadium, the Nittany Lions started off slow before roaring over the Bruins in the second half. Jenna Wistman and Nico Rodriguez represented Penn State Sports Night on the sidelines. Let's take a deeper look at what happened in that matchup.
Penn State set out to face one of the worst teams in the Big Ten on Saturday, October 5th. The Nittany Lions came into the game as heavy favorites, being ranked number 7 with a 4-0 record. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. The team has struggled all year to get the ball rolling in the first half, keeping fans on the edge of their seats most games. Fans showed out at Beaver Stadium today for the stripe out against new Big Ten opponent UCLA. Even though the team picked up a 27-10 win, they still continue to struggle early on each game.
I think really in my time, we've been pretty good in the second half in general. I think to me, I'm more interested in making sure that we're starting faster. I think that first quarter, you look at the time of possession, not what you want. You look at third down on offense and on defense, not what you want. Again, back to the point I have had with you guys earlier about getting enough touches and getting enough plays on offense and getting off the field on defense. So we got to start faster.
Penn State left the first quarter scoreless and only led UCLA by 11 points at the end of the first half. The offense had a hard time getting things going. The team went on to dominate in the second half. Drew threw for 237 yards with a touchdown and ran for another. Tyler Warren also stepped up, scoring a touchdown of his own. Now Penn State heads to the West Coast to face new Big Ten opponent USC, where they'll look to clean up their slow starts.
2 weekends ago, the Blue and White welcomed UCLA to Happy Valley for the first time since they joined the Big Ten. PSU won 27-11 in stripe-out fashion. This past weekend, the Blue and White traveled to Los Angeles for their toughest matchup yet against USC. This is the first time the two teams have met since 2016. The Nittany Lions are now the number 3 ranked team in the country following the win. I'm joined alongside Justin Chevalella, who is at Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum for the game. Justin, let's start with the offense. What stood out to you?
Well, a couple of things stood out to me. You heard in that last package from Jenna from James Franklin about the fact that they tend to start slow in his regime. Well, it happened again at USC. In fact, they were down by 14 points going into halftime at the Coliseum. But in the second half, some of the good things, there was a lot of good things in the first half that almost said to, fans and to, media that were there, Penn State shouldn't be down by 14. I look at that first drive for the Nittany Lions when Tyler Warren had 5 receptions and what looked to be a 6th was called back for pass interference on Julian Fleming. That was a great drive. That's the first time we've seen the first drive for Penn State result in something good and something that almost ended in a touchdown, but the offensive pass interference wiped that off the board. That was one of plenty of, good plays, good drives in that first half that just didn't amount to much. And when Penn State came out of halftime, these two just connected a lot more. 17 total receptions in the game for Tyler Warren with over 220 yards, a touchdown thrown in there. He caught the ball a lot. He threw the ball. He ran the ball. He snapped the ball. The real question is, what didn't he do on Saturday? He should be in the Heisman conversation. He should win the Mackey. He won a ton of weekly awards this week. But at the same time, Tyler Warren is nothing without this guy right here, who had easily the best performance of his collegiate career this far. 391 total yards. I know he had 3 interceptions, and I know fans weren't too keen on those 3 interceptions. But to me, a quarterback is playing their best football when they throw interceptions and can rebound and can continue out after that. He threw a first half interception. What happened when they came out for the second half? The first 2 drives of the third quarter, the best he has ever looked. And I doubled down on that, even though on the third drive, he ended up throwing his second pick of the game. I don't care. Drew Aller had the best performance of his young career, 391 yards, 2 touchdowns. And what stood out to me most, when the fourth quarter rolled around, specifically the last drive for the Nittany Lions, they needed 2 key fourth down conversions. He did not look scared. He stepped up in the pocket, avoided pressure, found Julian Fleming on both fourth downs, and then waited out Nicholas Singleton on a delay route to find that touchdown. He had his best game of his career. And it resulted in a Penn State win.
Yeah, absolutely. Warren looked really good. He just won AP National Player of the Week. He's putting himself into the Heisman conversation as a tight end, which is unheard of. And now let's talk about the other side of the ball. Tell me about the defense.
Well, just like the offense started slow, it was the same type of deal for the Nittany Lions defense. You think early on, first quarter, Quentin Joyner, 75 yards on the end around for USC, and you go, uh-oh, if you're the Nittany Lions, because it wasn't just that. Quentin Joyner had a couple of big carries. There was a couple of big pass plays. Woody Marks had a couple of big carries as well in that first half. But you could tell something was changing towards the end of the first half when the Nittany Lions started to come down on the defensive end, holding USC to a couple of field goals towards the end of that second quarter. You could tell there was a change in philosophy from Tom Allen, and it came from the pressures. There was a ton more pressures in the second quarter, but really when everything flipped was when the Nittany Lions came out after halftime. Same thing with the offense. They looked like a completely new team. They're the best defense in FBS when it comes to third quarter defense. 3 total points. And the only reason, the 3 came after a Drew Aller interception in which USC set up within their own 30 anyway. I mean, that's pretty exceptional to hold them to 3 points there. The defense started turning on. There was a lot more pressures. You see here in this photo from Com Radio's Maddie Bader. Luckily enough that we had some people down there. Deni Dennis Sutton gets to the running back there, that one being Woody Marks. Penn State really keyed in against the run in the second half. 42 rushing yards after 147 rushing yards in the first half. Penn State, they knew what they had to do, and they forced Miller Moss to get uncomfortable, and that's why the Nittany Lions had success. Not capitalized, but, exclaimed by his interception. That's Jalen Reed. He had a key interception when USC just needed a couple more yards to get into field goal range.
Yep, absolutely. The defense has looked really spectacular this far through 6 games. But now, before we wrap up, let's talk about the special teams.
Can I leave it simply as Ryan Cold as Ice Barker? Those aren't my words. That's what James Franklin said in the press conference post-game at the Coliseum. Ryan Barker, 4 for 4 in field goals. The walk-off in overtime after Michael Lance of USC missed their field goal. 36 yards, wins it for the Nittany Lions. And you have to take this story out of just the USC game where he goes 4 for 4 with the walk-off. He's a walk-on with the walk-off kick. He took over after Sanders Sahadak struggled against Illinois. But Ryan Barker was leading the kicker competition, is what James Franklin said, through spring ball, through summer ball, and then fall ball comes around, and towards the very end is when Sahadak took the job back from him. Sahadak struggled against West Virginia. They kept with him. Then he struggles against Illinois. Towards the end of Illinois, Barker comes on, hits the final extra point in that game. He's perfect against UCLA, and then when they needed him most, he comes up 4 for 4, just like that Wendy's meal deal, 4 for 4. He hits them all. 12 points for the Nittany Lions. And Nico, we're not big math guys, but do the math. That's 12 points off the legs of him, or the left leg of him. If the Nittany Lions don't have those 12 points and they only won by 3, that means they lose by 9. So you look at that and you go, Ryan Barker, he might be the MVP of this game, despite what Tyler Warren and Drew Aller did in this game. He came through clutch. Penn State walks away the win. And I like to say this because I know there was a lot of people freaking out. A 3-point win against an unranked team. USC was the number 26 team in the country. You don't rank outside the top 25, but USC is a ranked, or almost a ranked team. They are one good football program. They have so much talent on their team, but Penn State goes in on the road. They cause their own fan base makes it almost like a home game all the way in California, and everything that went their way. They were favored by 3.5 points. They won by 3. You can't really do much there. You were right where everyone expected you to be, and they pull out the win. They move to 6-0, and that's what's most important, going 1-0 each week.
Yeah, that's a big road win, and it looks like the Nittany Lions might have found their new kicker. The Penn State Nittany Lions will look to improve some areas of their game during this week's bye week. The team will then travel to Wisconsin next for a primetime matchup on Saturday night in Camp Randall Stadium. The Blue and White will look to improve to 7-0 before their biggest game of the season against the Ohio State Buckeyes on November 2nd at home. Now we'll take a short break before heading back to Brownwood.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning into this edition of Penn State Sports Night.
For all of us here at the Belisari Media Center, we are
Penn State Sports Night.
Live from the campus of Penn State University, this is PSN News.
Penn State Network News is a student-produced, bi-weekly live news show featuring all student talent.
From local and national news to sports, entertainment, weather, and live interviews, we have it all.
We also feature student-made packages from across campus.
Airing every Monday and Wednesday at 7 p.m.
We are PSN News.
Be sure to check us out on Twitter and Facebook at PSN News, on Instagram at Penn State Network News, and to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/PSN News.
Have a good night and stay safe, Penn State. Hey everyone, we are Red Carpet News, your main source of entertainment news at Penn State University.
Man, this festival is going to be popping.
I'm Alex Porzillo, here with Aiden Harold.
He's going to 23rd with Daddy Elon Warbucks to actual space away from Kip.
So insane, especially during Kendrick's part when they came out, reporting on anything from music, movies, TV shows, fashion, to celebrity gossip. You don't want to miss out on any of the hot topics we discuss. Find our segments on YouTube under the name Red Carpet News for your daily dose of entertainment. We are Red Carpet News. Welcome back to Dear Old State Update. I'm now joined alongside our soccer beat reporters, Owen Camaros and Anna LaCastro. Now, the women's team has recently won 2 games, beating Maryland away 5-0 before returning home to beat Minnesota in a 3-2 thriller. Anna, what did you like from the recent performance?
Well, I'll start with Maryland. A 5-0 win is obviously super exciting, but what made it even more exciting was the fact that there were 5 different goal scorers for Penn State in that game. That's something we love to see from soccer. This matchup, Penn State went into it pretty confidently because historically they do very well against Maryland, but it became so exciting because just everyone on the offense was having such a great day. They did have a bit of a slow start, only scoring 1 goal in that first half, but they totally made up for it by locking down on defense and then having an awesome 4-0 second half. And then for Minnesota, that's where their real challenge kicked in. Minnesota has always been a very physical team. Penn State knew that heading into the match. That's something the Nittany Lions aren't always super great at, but this time they really dug their heels in. They didn't take any nonsense. I think they were able to return the physicality very well for Penn State, and I think that was one of the big keys to them doing so well in that matchup.
Yeah, I really like the offensive performance, like you said, versus Maryland. But then obviously the unfortunate situation, Amelia White goes down with injury. I thought the team responded really, really well after losing Amelia White. I think a couple of players came in, Kaylin Wolf in particular, who had her first start of the season versus Minnesota, scored in the first minute, really set the tone for Penn State. They did go down 2-1, but I mean, you can't fault the Nittany Lions for going down necessarily. Those were some killer goals. Romine had maybe the best goal of the season for any Big Ten team with a 30-yard just banger. And then the Nittany Lions, what I've really liked is that they've been able to get players involved. This season, a lot of the time it's been the Caitlin McBean show, and McBean has 14 goals on the year. That being said, she's been relied upon maybe a bit too much in important games, and the team hasn't necessarily been able to get other players involved. Versus Minnesota, they did. Olivia D'Amico scores her first goal of the year, the winner. It was an incredible goal, but I like the fact that it was a connection between Fusco and D'Amico that we hadn't seen so far this season. That's the connection, and it turns into 3 points for Penn State.
It certainly was, and they both were incredible goals and games for the Nittany Lions to get and put on their record. Now moving from the past to the future, the women's team is going to be traveling out to the West Coast where they're going to be facing not only UCLA, but also USC. These are going to be some challenging matchups as they head on the road for the Nittany Lions. So, Owen, what do they need to get these wins?
Penn State needs to control the midfield. The Nittany Lions play in a double pivot. Usually it's Molly Martin, sometimes Rowan Lappy, sometimes Julia Rach, sometimes Natalie Wilson. Whoever's next to Molly Martin, they play in a double pivot with two holding midfielders that are very stagnant players. They sit in the middle, they control the game, they collect second balls, they recycle possession. That's kind of the way the Eric and Dominic squad has worked. The Nittany Lions, when they are dominating matches, it's because their midfield is controlling the tempo of matches. That being said, when the Nittany Lions are struggling, especially if you look at that Michigan State game, it's because the midfield's kind of played off the pitch. When Penn State doesn't control the midfield, when they don't have their players on the ball, controlling the tempo, controlling the pace of play, it leaves their offense stranded, it leaves their winger stranded, it leaves Caitlin McBean stranded, and that was really killed Penn State versus Iowa and versus Michigan State. So the Nittany Lions, whoever plays next to Molly Martin, needs to understand that their role is to recycle possession, to control the pace of play, to dominate the midfield, and I think the Nittany Lions can do that because I think both of these teams that they're going to play, especially UCLA, is a team that likes to play long and won't necessarily try to beat Penn State player for player in the midfield.
I absolutely agree with you, Owen. Control in the midfield is and has always been super essential. And then one point that I'd really like to emphasize is the fact that UCLA shouldn't be overlooked. I know that they're not ranked right now, but if we've learned literally anything from college football these past few weekends, rank doesn't always matter.
Nope,
they
not
have
at all.
A great record so far
Bowling
this
Green
season.
who?
They have a great record so far this season, and they're undefeated at home. So Penn State will have to treat this matchup like they treat an Ohio State matchup.
Mm-hmm.
And then coming after that, they have number 19 USC ranked right above them. That's going to be super exciting. And then Ohio State kind of looming at the end of regular season play. And I think two other keys to succeeding in these next few games for them are going to be to lose that slow start that they had against Maryland, and then also to keep up the physicality that they brought to Minnesota, because I think it's a good look for Penn State, and it's really important in Big Ten soccer in general.
Yeah, those are all extremely good points. And to not only end your season on the road, 3 games on the road on that, but for it to be UCLA, USC, and then Ohio State, like you said, looming at the end of the season can certainly be very intimidating. But I think if the Nittany Lions do those things, like you guys said, they could be in a good standing. Now we're going to transition over to the men's team. Now the men's team has had a bit of a rocky start this season, but they've recently turned it around really well. Now, what has been this key factor to this revival of the second half of the season? Owen, want to give us an insight?
Yeah, Penn State and the men's team is a possession-based team. They play really well in possession. They play poorly out of possession. They're not a counterattacking team. They're going to create chances. They're going to create set-piece goals, which they have been very, very good at this season through their possession-based style of play. The Nittany Lions have done a lot better at controlling possession, and it's been through their midfield. It's been because in the Nittany Lions 4-4-2, Malik Dauda, Ben Liscombe, sometimes Grabfelder, whoever's next to Dauda, oftentimes Freddie Bell as well, have been really, really good in recycling possession, claiming second balls, and controlling matches. The other thing for the Nittany Lions is they've found their star striker in Abubakar Kamar, who's come in and had a very, very good return from injury, which was very important because without him, the Nittany Lions sometimes don't necessarily have that guy that they can play into who can control the pace of play.
Penn State's possession has definitely greatly improved. And kind of going off of your point, something that I've noticed from watching Penn State play at Jeffrey Field, especially against UCLA, is that the energy that team gets right after they score is absolutely unmatched. They immediately get more confident, their passes get quicker, their possession is better, and their shots are much harder. I think that was the key for them to coming back and tying UCLA in that game, and that's also been super important in their victories. That being said, obviously you can't just have that kind of energy off a win. You need to be able to generate that all the time if you want to be consistent.
Certainly, celebrating just after goals is not going to get it done. Now talking about the rest of the schedule for the men's team, just kind of like the women's. The men are also going to be hopping on a plane and traveling all the way to the West Coast, but this time a little more up north. They're going to be facing off against Washington this Friday. What can we kind of expect as they take on this new Big Ten team, Anna?
Rough road trip week. Everyone's heading all the way across the country. But I think we should expect a pretty good matchup between Penn State and Washington. They have similar records so far this season, and they're both coming into this game off of losses, so they're going to be looking to find their footing again and get back on track. And I think for Penn State, if they're able to maintain lots of possession in the first half, start quickly and score early, those are going to be the things that are going to get them a spark that they need to succeed.
Yeah, the Nittany Lions have lived and died by the second half, and Penn State should have a good second half performance, especially against a Washington team that has struggled in the second half. The big thing for Penn State is going to be Washington's going to give them a lot of possession. Washington plays direct, they play over the top, so Penn State should be able to play in possession, which is where they're at their best.
Yeah, well, both teams will have a nice travel out there, hopefully, and then we'll just see how they finish off on the road. Now moving on from the field to the court, let's head over to Rec Hall, where our very own Ethan Ellis attended Penn State Volleyball's Wear White game to see what's made them a top 3 team this season.
A blanket of white covered the stands of Rec Hall as Penn State took on 11th ranked Oregon in their annual Wear White game. The matchup marked the 6th ranked opponent the Nittany Lions had taken on this season. In front of over 4,000 fans, Penn State welcomed Oregon to the Big Ten in the toughest way possible. Penn State set the tone early with a 6-point win in the first set, holding Oregon to a miserable .054 hitting percentage, a theme that would be common all night long.
I think we had a couple blocks, and I think they had some unforced errors from some of their attackers that was unusual for them.
After losing the first set 25-19, the Ducks were never able to get their feet back under them. They'd go on to lose their next 2 sets in a similar fashion, with Penn State holding them to under 19 points a set. But Penn State's dominance extended far beyond the court tonight. Here in the students section, the noise from the wrecking crew at times seemed to affect the Ducks' ability to hit the ball.
I think the energy is great. I think they're loud, and I think our fans really like good volleyball, and I think it does rattle some players.
Jess Merzik once again led the team in kills with 16, bringing her total on the season to 206. Teammate Caroline Juravicius described what it's like playing with her.
I think that Jess is honestly the greatest player that I've ever played next to, and you learn a lot from her, whether it be as a woman or as a player. It's really an honor to be on the court with her and learn from her.
After this sweep of Oregon, the Nittany Lions are on the road for their next 3 matchups against Michigan State, Indiana, and Ohio State. For Penn State Sports Night, I'm Ethan Ellis.
And Ethan, that win was a massive momentum booster in the Nittany Lions season. So what is it about this team that's allowed them to take down and sweep 3 top 15 opponents?
Right. Well, let's start with the offense first. Jess Merzik has been on a tear this season. And along with Cameron Hanna up there with her, they've combined for 442 kills. And what they're really doing is they're finding those open spots in the backcourt, in those back corners, but also in the middle. They're able to recognize the gaps in those defenses that they're playing against. And that's where a lot of Penn State's points are coming from. And we just haven't seen any Big Ten or out of conference opponent defenses find any sort of answer for these two. And they've really just been on a tear this season. But let's now go to the defense. And this one has been big for Penn State. You think Maggie Mendelson, you think Taylor Trammell, 124 combined blocks for the Nittany Lions. And realistically, this is one of the biggest parts of their team because this defense is what keeps them from becoming rattled, honestly, when these top-tier teams start firing off points early on in the game.
Yeah, so you talked about, that front line for both on offense and defensively. So, with the loss to number 1 Pitt, they got swept, was not a pretty game for the Nittany Lions. Following that game and following, their recent performance against Oregon, what do you see as the ceiling for this Nittany Lions squad?
Right, the ceiling still realistically is a national championship. Obviously, that loss to Pitt was really set off some alarms for the program, but I think that almost speaks a little bit more to just how good that Pittsburgh team is versus how bad of a game it was for Penn State. I think with this Penn State team, some of these top tier opponents and even some of these unranked opponents, quite frankly, if they can go in there and rattle off a few points to start the game off, that really can offset this team, and it really starts to confuse them. And that's where I think we start seeing some of their top tier hitters like Jess Merzik become a little bit confused, and they get a little bit desperate for those extra points. And that's where you start seeing some of the hitting errors that we've seen that's really just plagued them in these first sets.
Yeah, seen a couple rough starts to the matches, almost playing down to their opponents. But, as we turn towards the remainder of the season, the Big Ten is a super competitive conference when it comes to women's volleyball. How do you see the rest of the season playing out, and what big opponents do we have to look out for?
Right. So these 2 big opponents in red, those are going to be the big ones. You've got number 2, Nebraska. That's a home game, so that's going to be a huge advantage for the Nittany Lions. But then this is the next closest big game for them. That's Wisconsin. They're ranked 9th. And the Penn State, it's been a little bit hit or miss with these top-tier teams. You think Oregon and Purdue, they swept both of those teams, and Purdue was a road game when they were a top 10 team. Then they sweep number 11 Oregon at home. I mean, it kind of confuses you when you remember that they were swept by Pitt. So I think that what they really need to do in this game is they need to set the tone early. They need to get a couple of easy points right off the bat, and that really is what builds their momentum. I think with Nebraska especially, it's really going to help them that it's a home game. This crowd noise in Rec Hall, when I was there for the Wear White game, it was loud, and I expect nothing different with this Nebraska game. I think that the noise somewhat disorients the opponents, and I think it really hurts them, especially when they're serving. We see a ton of service errors from these away teams, and I think it's because of how loud the crowd can be. Another thing to look at is Penn State has outscored their opponents a lot more than Nebraska and Wisconsin have. So I think that's a big thing for Penn State to ride on into this game, is how much they're blowing out these opponents compared to Wisconsin and Nebraska. And I think that Penn State defense, especially for Sarah Franklin of Wisconsin, I think that Penn State defense was probably going to wreak some havoc on her.
Yeah, that November 9th game against number 9 Wisconsin is absolutely looming for number 3 Penn State as of right now. And while there is still so much time to sort out with the rest of the women's volleyball season, the team is currently on a roll with 8 consecutive wins coming into their matchup at Ohio State on Friday. That'll do it for volleyball here. For Ethan Ellis, I'm Jeremy Rose, and we'll see you after the break.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning into this edition of Penn State Sports Night.
For all of us here at the Belisari Media Center, we are
Penn State Sports Night.
Live from the campus of Penn State University, this is PSN News.
Penn State Network News is a student-produced, bi-weekly live news show featuring all student talent.
From local and national news to sports, entertainment, weather, and live interviews, we have it all.
We also feature student-made packages from across campus.
Airing every Monday and Wednesday at 7 p.m.
We are PSN News.
Be sure to check us out on Twitter and Facebook at PSN News, on Instagram at Penn State Network News, and to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/PSN News.
Have a good night and stay safe, Penn State. Hey everyone, we are Red Carpet News, your main source of entertainment news at Penn State University. Man, this festival is going to be popping.
I'm Alex Porzillo, here with Aiden Harrell.
He's going to 23rd with Daddy Elon Warbucks to actual space away from Kim.
So in sync, especially during Kendrick's part when they came out, reporting on anything from music, movies, TV shows, fashion, to celebrity gossip. You don't want to miss out on any of the hot topics we discuss.
Find our segments on YouTube under the name Red Carpet News for your daily dose of entertainment.
We are Red Carpet News. We now shift over to the ice where the men's and women's hockey seasons are just getting started. State college temperatures definitely dropped today, but the action on the ice is heating up. I'm now joined with Anthony Descher and Josh Bartosik to break down the latest action. The men's team is fresh off a loss from Quinnipiac, but the women's team just won 2 games against Union. Anthony, I'll start with you. I know it was a tough environment that Penn State had to go into at Quinnipiac. What was the difference maker in that game?
Well, you're right. It's never really that easy to go on the road, especially against a team like Quinnipiac, who is always in national championship conversation, number 8 in the nation, just 2 years removed from their last natty. It was not going to be easy for the Nittany Lions. All the Nittany Lions really had to do was play with Quinnipiac. And Quinnipiac, they pressed the gas pedal early. They scored 2 in the first and 1 very early in the second. It really looked like Penn State was down and out until later in the game started happening. And then Penn State showed that, hey, gritty not pretty. We know that term around here. They'll fight back, and they did. It was 3-2 going down to the wire. They really put Quinnipiac on their heels, forced them to feel uncomfortable. By the end of the game, Penn State felt a lot better about that road trip because it's never easy, as you said, to win in Quinnipiac.
Yeah, and now shifting over to the women's team, also on the road, but walked away with 2 wins. That's now 3 in a row for them. Who was the game changer for the Nittany Lions?
Yeah, it was kind of a team effort, really, for Penn State, the women's hockey team, because Maya Baslett was out just out in this series. Not sure if it was an injury or something else that happened with her, one of the best players on the team last year and starting the year hot. But Alyssa Machado was really, really solid for Penn State. 3 goals, 2 assists, got AHA Forward of the Week this past week. You also look at all the newcomers, not just the freshmen, but some of the transfers as well. 8 combined points, a goal, 7 assists for all the newcomers was really, really solid. You speak about those transfers in between the pipes in game 1, no Katie Disa. It was the Minnesota State transfer, Lauren Barbara, who stepped up in that one. 22 saves on 25 shot attempts was really, really good. And you look at this Penn State team, we talk about how they always schedule tougher non-conference opponents. We talked about it last year in a similar spot at this desk, how they were struggling out of the gate in non-conference 1-6-1. Now they're 4-2-0. Their best start since going 4-1-1 in 2019 and 2020 to start a season. But you go back to that season, it was just conference opponents, not non-conference. So really, really solid job from Jess Campersol's squad so far to start the year hot.
Yeah, and we've known how dominant they've been in their conference, so getting a good start now is only going to help them down the line. But now looking to next week, what's going to be the key for them moving forward?
Well, I can only emphasize it so much, but special teams, and, well, you both guessed it, special teams. I mean, look, this is a Penn State team that has struggled mightily on both sides, both the power play and the penalty kill. We'll start on the penalty kill side. They took 8 penalties in those 2 games against Union this past weekend. They gave up 2 power play goals, which going 6 for 8, 75% isn't terrible on a weekend. But if you're spending, the majority of the time, if you add it up with this Penn State team, they're averaging 4 penalties a game. So it's about 8 minutes in the box, and that's almost half a period. If you're spending almost half a period in the penalty box down a man, or in this case a woman, you're not putting yourself in the best position to put your best foot forward and come away with a win. Now, it hasn't bit them too much yet. It did against Northeastern when they took a multitude of penalties in that opening series against the Huskies. But then you move over to the power play side of things. They did score a power play goal in this series and went 1 for 7, but that's just their 4th power play goal on now 24 attempts, below 19% at 18.7, or hovering around there right now. They've got to get the power play going. They've got to get that unit hot, especially with the amount of talent on that team. Caitlin Roberts, Tessa Janicki, Maya Baslett, obviously, if she comes back, if she's playing in the series against Dartmouth. But despite the early start and the good start for Penn State, Jeff Campersol's really got to emphasize special teams moving forward.
Yeah, and beginning of the season's when you iron out some of those things, especially when you have a lot of new people blending together. Now, Anthony, the men's team, has a week off despite some high hopes following the end of that Quinnipiac game. What do you think the team needs to focus on before they get back on the ice?
I think the team just needs to keep doing what they're doing. I'm going to start with the freshmen. A lot of freshmen came into this locker room, and my idea for them was just fill into your role and be good at it. And they filled into the role early, and they've become very good at it. You see J.J. Weebush and Charlie Serrato down there already filling in towards the top of the Penn State points rankings. And then we go over to the sophomore class. We knew them last year, Josh. I know you followed this team too. They were phenomenal, especially Aiden Fink. We talk about Tyler Warren being an absolute dog. How about Aiden Fink being this team's absolute dog? You think my hair's slick? He's even slicker. 7 points so far in the early season, towards the top of the entire college hockey nation in points. Then you talk about the upperclassmen, Denny Geniev doing his job, new captain Simon Mack doing his job as well. Ben Schoen filling in perfectly well right after coming off a very long injury. And then Arseny Sergeyev really filling in between the pipes. Who really knew what the goaltending situation was going to be? He comes in, posts up some great numbers, a 198 goals against average, a 928 save percentage, and 1 shutout early on in the season against Alaska Fairbanks. This team is fun to watch, and I know it's a bye week. It's going to be very pretty quiet in Pagula Ice Arena, especially with on the road with Dartmouth, correct?
They're at home, so it will be rocking a little bit.
It will be rocking a little bit, but on the men's side, a little quiet. They'll be enjoying whatever they enjoy on the weekends. But the fans will come in next week against St. Lawrence. They're going to pack the barn. It's going to be rocking. It's going to be a lot of fun because this team is just a fun team to watch.
And we know the Roar Zone is going to bring the energy when both of these teams get back in Pagula. The seasons have only gotten started and conference play is still a few weeks away. Regardless, across all sports, the Nittany Lions have put some special things on tape. Let's check out some of their top plays.
At number 5, here's Katron Allen with an angry run. He led Penn State's rushing attack in the 27-11 victory over UCLA.
Oregon goes for the kill when Izzy Stark and Maggie Mendelson get the block.
We head to the pitch at number 3 where UCLA tries to clear the ball, but it falls to the feet of Caden Gradfelter, who fires from long range.
Back at the Ware White in Rec Hall, Taylor Trammell lays the hammer into the court, getting the kill.
Finally, at number 1, Tyler Warren catches a 5-yard touchdown reception to put Penn State up 14-3 in the second quarter against UCLA. That's all the time we have for this week's Dear Old State Update. For Bronwyn Liber and the rest of our Penn State Sports Night team, I'm Amanda Vogt. Thank you for tuning in and have a great rest of your Monday night.